The series of documents from the Weizmann archives will be Exhibit T1777.
Mr. Hausner, may I be permitted by the court to draw attention to certain extracts from these documents. In the first place, a statement from the British Foreign Ministry from G.A. Hall, a letter to Dr. Weizmann in July 1944. Top secret. A suggestion has been put forward by the Jewish Agency for the evacuation of Jews persecuted by the Nazis. A reliable representative of Hungarian Jewry reached Constantinople by German plane, accompanied by a Hungarian Gestapo agent. Further in the letter, the transaction is described, and it is stated that the Nazis suggest that instead of destroying the remnant of the Jews in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, their exit should be allowed to Spain or Portugal, but not to Palestine. And this in exchange for 10,000 trucks and certain quantities of tea, coffee, and soap. As they are prepared immediately to release 10,000 Jews without receiving anything in exchange, and they're also prepared to consider the exchange of Jews for German war prisoners.
President of Court, this is written by a man of the British Foreign Office to Dr. Weizmann, as though Dr. Weizmann had not known about this?
As I stated before to the court, there were statements which were transmitted by the Jewish Agency in Jerusalem through the High Commissioner to the British Foreign Office in London, and it was known, therefore, that this material, which was destined for Dr. Weizmann, would also come to the knowledge of the British Foreign Office.
Judge Halevi, when was the conversation in Aleppo?
On the 19th of July. Mr. Hausner corrects himself, on the 11th of July.
And this was before the conversation?
Yes, this preceded discussions with Chaim Barlas and other representatives of the Jewish Agency in Constantinople. This, to all intents and purposes, represents the essence of the statement which was transmitted by the Jewish Agency in Jerusalem to Dr. Weizmann in London. The Jewish Agency expresses its apprehension that unless possibilities are created for rescuing Hungarian and Czech Jews, their fate would be sealed. While it states that there are terrific difficulties in the way, the Jewish Agency feels that tremendous efforts must be made in order to achieve the salvation of Jews who otherwise would be unredeemable. On the following day, Dr. Weizmann writes to Anthony Eden and thanks him for having passed the information to him, and said he would need a day or so in order to recover from the shock of this news. My supreme duty, he writes,
to try and discover the course of action which offers the best hope of saving Jewish lives. חובתי העליונה היא לברר מה האפשרות להציל את חיי היהודים. הוא מבקש שני דברים.
Dr. Weizmann makes two requests, an immediate meeting with Eden and a Turkish visa for Mr. Shertok. I will return to the next document, which is dated from the month of July 1944, a request to the British authorities that the death camps should be bombed. The following document is a cable which went in code to Shattuck at the Jewish Agency in London and was received on the 19th of July in London. Mr. Shattuck states that he waited 4 days in Aleppo in order to meet his friend, whom he eventually met and spoke with for 6 hours. He was very impressed with the sincerity of the character of this emissary, and he continues to report that he saw the High Commissioner together with Mr. Ben-Gurion, that the High Commissioner communicated with London in order to give Dr. Weizmann the Jewish Agency's evaluation of the situation. Mr. Shattuck concludes his cable by saying, we have to do everything in order to keep the door open, in order to enable our friend to return. Do everything possible in order to speed up my own journey.
And inform Nahum Goldman.
On the 23rd of July 1944, Mr. Randall, who was in charge of the Refugees Department in the Foreign Office.
President of Court, what was Mr. Hall's duty?
Mr. Hall was the Undersecretary. Mr. Randall writes to Dr. Weizmann that it is inconceivable that keeping Brand in Cairo means that His Majesty's government is not prepared to give every consideration to methods for the rescue of European Jewry. But if the particular plan brought by Brand has any right to particular consideration, this is a question which shall be discussed when Mr. Shattuck arrives. The following document is an internal report given by Mr. Shattuck when he reached London on the 27th of July. He reached London at 1 p.m. that day, and at 6 p.m. he dictated the report. There is a complete description of his efforts to secure the visa to Constantinople. The statement, the answer from Ankara is he should not come without the visa. And on page 4, a statement from a high British officer that there would be no difficulty as regards Brand's return.
Brand left Turkey for Palestine.
This was a very clear promise, and Brand relied upon this. Again, the report on the conversation with Brand. And after that, Mr. Sharet reports that he saw Mr. Ben-Gurion and the High Commissioner on his return to Jerusalem. And on page 13, he delineated the specific demands that Brand should return, that the Germans should be given some hint with regard to the desire of the other side to negotiate. Suggestions also with regard
what page of that is that?
The name of the persons who should conduct negotiations. National Refugee Council of the United States, the Intergovernmental Committee, or the Red Cross. On page 14, it was stated that the High Commissioner had announced to Mr. Ben-Gurion, had transmitted to Ben-Gurion and Shattuck the contents of the discussion between Eden and Weizmann.
To avoid anything that might look like slamming the door. בעמוד 15
On page 15, Mr. Shertok said that the High Commissioner had not been impressed with his arguments in favor of the return of Mr. Brand. And later Mr. Shertok says that Brand would not have left Turkey on his way to Syria had he not received this promise. The High Commissioner replied sharply, "I know what you're going to say, that there was a breach of promise." The answer is simple. There is a war on.
Who was the High Commissioner at that time? President of Court asking.
MacMichael was the High Commissioner at the time, replies Mr. Hausner. After that, a report is given upon contacts with the American consulate. On contacts with Mr. Ira Hirschman, and the statement made by Mr. Stettinius, who was then the American Secretary of State, and the fact that Hirschman was very impressed with the sincerity and integrity of Brand. And Mr. Sharet concludes by stating that he returned to Cairo and then journeyed to London the same evening.
To return.
Again, the same requests from the previous meeting with Mr. Hall were raised. I have mentioned the previous meeting. Mr. Eden expressed his deep sympathy and stressed that he had to be extremely careful. The enemy apparently is playing an aggressive game. When he made that proposal to the cabinet, the feeling was that he, Eden, went too far. Furthermore, they also have to convince the Americans and the Soviets. They worked in agreement with the Americans on this whole matter, but they must also obtain the consent of the Soviet Union. The cabinet cabled to Moscow and they are awaiting reply. Mr. Sharet adds that the proposal to send Badr is still in force. He believes that the Germans are prepared to make a deal. Mr. Sharet adds that he thinks one has to pay the ransom in order to save the Jews. Mr. Eden doubts whether this is the right way. He doubted whether this was a possible course. As far as Mr. Badr's journey is concerned, he was not for that. Mr. Sharet says that the question now is, what can Brand take back with him if he returns to Budapest? Here, Dr. Weizmann details the aid memoir, which is not connected with Brand's journey. I return to the aid memoir now. These are the demands put by Dr. Weizmann in that previous document. It is in paragraph 3. In order to save the Jews of Hungary, one has to tell the Germans through some intermediate. One should consider it. As for the bombing, one should one should contact the Air Ministry. He already spoke with them about bombing the death camps at the demand of the Sochnut, and he is prepared to discuss the bombing of the railroad now. Dr. Weizmann concludes and says, yes, we shall also have to meet again to discuss the creation of a situation where such tragedies can no longer recur. And here I return to the document from the 11th of July, which I skipped previously. A document submitted by the Jewish Agency people in London. They are discussing the possibilities of these bombings. There are reasons pro and con. They reach the conclusion that this bombing is essential because in any event it would have a restraining value because the Germans are a deterrent value, because the Allies, it would show the Germans that the Allies regard the murder of Jews as an act which must be, for which there must be retribution. It would show the genuineness of Allied condemnation. Perhaps this will lead to pressure against the continued extermination. Possibly it will result in internal pressure against the continuation of the massacres. And finally, in order to convince the Allies absolutely that this was worthwhile, they add that Auschwitz also includes German munition factories which are working for Siemens and Krupp. President of Court, was that prepared in Jerusalem? Mr. Hausner, no, that was prepared in London, 11th, 844 by the Jewish Agency. On the same day when that meeting took place, Mr. Sharet reported to Mr. Ben-Gurion and to Mr. Nachum Goldman in a cable of which we have the copy in front of us. This is a report about the meeting with Anthony Eden. Mr. Sharet sensed that the time for discussions has gone. The time for temporizing is over, he says.
Remote chance of saving remnants not to be missed. We realize our proposals are unorthodox and unprecedented, but that they are warranted by tragedy which is without parallel or precedent. צעדים מיידיים הם הכרחיים אם אנחנו חושבים על איזה אפשרות של הצלת שארית הפליטה. אנחנו יודעים כי הצעתנו הן ללא תקדים, אבל הן מחויבות המציאות על ידי הטרגדיה.
Mr. Hausner translating back into Hebrew. Mr. Sharet, on the 12th of July, met Mr. Randall of the Foreign Office. Again, they speak about Brand's mission. Again, they ask that Badr be permitted to go to Budapest. An alternative proposal is to send Kuhlmann from the Joint Intergovernmental Committee of the League of Nations. Perhaps he could be the one to convince the Germans that indeed the Allies are prepared to negotiate. Mr. Sharet proposes further on, it is on page 4, that a statement be published that all Jews in Nazi-occupied countries will be proclaimed as British protected or Anglo-American protected persons. Randall immediately replied that this has been under consideration and was rejected. Mr. Randall informed Mr. Shertok on the 15th of July that the proposal to bomb the death camps is under consideration. That application has been made to the Soviet government and a personal application from Mr. Eden to Mr. Molotov, and he wishes that Mr. Weizmann be informed accordingly. The discussion apparently was to be continued on the 6th of July and until the 1st of September, because on the 1st of September 1944, Richard Law, the permanent undersecretary in the Foreign Office, I think that was his rank, writes to Dr. Weizmann the following. You will remember that on your meeting on the 6th of July, you spoke with the Foreign Secretary about the bombing of the Birkenau death camp and about the atrocities which were committed there by the Germans toward Hungarian and other Jews. You asked about steps which might be taken to put an end to this, or at least to suspend these atrocities, and you proposed that you said that something could be achieved if we bomb the camps and perhaps the railroad tracks leading there. Mr. Eden immediately brought this to the attention of the Secretary of State for Air. The matter was discussed to the fullest extent by a team of the Air Force, but I regret to inform you that because of the great technical difficulties, it was discussed by the air staff, but I'm sorry to have to tell you that because of the great technical difficulties involved, we have no choice but to refrain from using your proposal under the present circumstances. I understand that this decision will be a disappointment to you, but be sure that the matter was considered exhaustively. Judge Halevi, what were the technical difficulties? Mr. Hausner, this may have been known to the writer of this letter. It is not known to me, of course. As for my private opinion, I do not think there were technical difficulties. Judge Halevi, is there any document, any explanation of this? Mr. Hausner, perhaps the last memorandum which will explain it. I merely wish to recall another letter. J.F. Martin, the Chief Private Secretary to the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, writing to Dr. Weizmann. President of Court, where is this document? Mr. Hausner, you have it with you, Your Honors. It is from the 30th of October, 1944. If you do not have it, sir, I am prepared to submit another copy. It certainly is in the photostatic copies, or rather in the originals. It is the penultimate document. Yes, I have given 2 copies. I am prepared to give a third one, of course. We have one. Here it is. It has a notation which I put on it, but it doesn't matter really. Well, when they had the Moscow meeting at that time, Weizmann applied right there, and Martin says, we have discussed this matter with the Soviets, and that's it. The next document is the aid memoir prepared for a possible testimony to be given by Dr. Weizmann at the Nuremberg Military Tribunal. The date is November 1945, and it says the following. At the beginning of 1944, when more than 700,000 Jews were still alive in Hungary, the Jewish Agency proposed to the British authorities to take hundreds of Palestinian Jews and drop them in parachutes into Hungary, and this, according to the considered judgment of British military circles, could have helped the Allies militarily and could have also been of value for the prevention of the extermination of many Hungarian Jews who were then alive. When this program was approved by all authorized military bodies, and arrangements were made to carry out this plan. The colonial and foreign officers intervened, and because of political considerations, ordered the military authorities to refrain from applying this program.
verlassen mit den Kindern und ich muss mich jeden Tag melden. Also da haben wir schon so viel Erfahrung während unserer illegalen Arbeit, das war nicht notwendig, mir dazu Erklärungen zu geben, was das bedeutet, wenn man jemand mitgeteilt wurde, dass er darf Budapest nicht verlassen und ich muss mich jeden Tag melden.
It was easy to understand. I don't remember whether he used these words and said, "You are hostages." I cannot reconstruct the conversation now, but it was clear that when we were told, "You may not leave Budapest and you must report every single day," it was quite clear to us what this meant. Our experience, our underground experience, taught us quite clearly what it meant when a person is being told that he may not leave town and must report every day. We did not need any explanations.
You spoke about the state secret. Did Eichmann tell you what was the secret?
Angelegenheit vorgetragen,
What was
dass
involved?
hat angeboten, 1 Million Juden für 10.000 Lastkraftwagen und meinem Mann hat ein Passport gegeben, damit im freien Ausland das mitteilen soll und das Geschäft unter Dach bringt.
Yes, they lectured to me about this. I was told it was a question of releasing 1 million persons in exchange for 10,000 trucks, that my husband received a passport so that he can go abroad to the free world and speak about this and advance this transaction.
During this same conversation, was there any discussion of the fate of some 600 Jews?
So wie von den Gegenseite ist vorgetragen worden, ist auch von jüdischer Seite die Forderungen wiederholt geworden, dass solange die Verhandlungen dauern, werden keine Deportationen nach Auschwitz. Und da man hat schon früher verhandelt auf 600 Zertifikate, die uns zur Verfügung stehen. Und in Konstanza wartet ein Transportschiff, mit dem sie abfahren können. Und da würde darüber gesprochen und betont, dass während damit man soll den guten Wille sehen, die sind bereit, uns dazu zu helfen, dass diese 600 Leute, das war eine von den Forderungen.
Ja, dass diese 600 Leute...
Dass die 600 Leute sollen von Ungarn wegfahren können auf neutrale Gebiet.
Yes, in those conversations, they spoke about the counter-proposals also, and the Jewish side also represented its demands. And they said that all along during these negotiations, deportations to Auschwitz already had been in progress. And previously there was... Yes, the demand was put forth that in the course of these negotiations the deportations should not proceed. And even previously there was this matter of the 600 persons who were ready to, who had certificates to Palestine, and there was the ship in Constanza which could take them, and it had been mentioned that as a gesture of goodwill the Nazis could release these people who had, these 600 people who had these certificates, may be permitted to leave for a neutral area. The ship was there in Constanza waiting for them.
Mrs. Brand, you see the accused here. Do you identify him as the person with whom you spoke?
100%.
Do you remember whether outside his office?
Der Buchdrucker hätte ich ihn nicht erkannt, weil war so zusammengeschlagen. Also bin ich konfrontiert worden mit dem Buchdrucker, der mir die falschen Papiere gemacht hat.
The next day they called me downstairs, and in the presence of one of those people from the German Dienststelle, the SD, they showed me someone. I wouldn't have recognized him if they hadn't introduced him. That's how he was changed. They showed me a man who was the owner of the printing shop. He was so mutilated and beaten that I couldn't have recognized him. This was the man of the printing shop who did this illegal work for us.
Were you also interrogated?
Diese Konfrontierung,
If
ein
so,
oder
with
zwei
regard to
Tage,
what?
mich schon nicht, wie lange bin ich ruhig gesessen, hat man mich gerufen zum Aushören.
I do not remember how long this confrontation took, but later they took me about a day or two after this confrontation. They called me for an interrogation.
Do you know the name of any of the interrogators?
Der Chef selbst hat mich ausgefragt, Hein Peter.
Peter.
It was the chief himself who interrogated me. Hein Peter was his name.
Zuerst hat man gesprochen über die falschen Papiere und es war eine Serie von Bildern von der ganzen Gruppe von den Haluzim, mit denen wir zusammengearbeitet haben, ob ich die Leute kenne. Und da ich die Leute nicht gekannt habe, haben sie mich gut verprügelt.
They showed me a series of pictures. They were photographs of the Chalutzim, the pioneers. They asked me whether I knew these people. Since I did not know them, I was beaten thoroughly.
Nach diesen ersten Fragen und den ersten Schlägereien haben sie eine zweite Frage gestellt, wo mein Mann ist.
After the first questions and first beatings, I was asked a second question, where is your husband? Did you tell him the truth?
Halb Frage, halb Schlagen hat gedauert ungefähr 7 Stunden.
Well, this interrogation, which was half interrogation, half beating, this took about 7 hours.
Selbstverständlich, ich habe nicht erzählt und deswegen haben sie mich so lange gehalten und geprügelt, weil ich habe große Angst gehabt, den Reichsgeheimnis weiterzugeben.
Naturally, since I did not tell anything, they kept me so long and beat me. I was afraid to give away this Reich secret.
Angst gehabt, dass ich wollte nicht sein diejenige, die diese einzige Chance, wo wir uns angeknüpft haben, wegen meiner Schwäche, also habe ich geschwiegen.
I was afraid to be the one who, on account of my weakness, would jeopardize this chance which we had, this entire thing which we clutched as a straw.
Where did they take you finally?
Nach meiner Ausfrage, nächsten Früh morgens auf einmal sind erschienen worden dort vor mir die SS, die Leute von SS, und man hat die ganzen Leute, die in meine Wohnungen verhaftet haben, sind wir befreit worden, besser gesagt übertragen worden in Sicherheitsdienst, in deutsche Sicherheitsdienst.
On the day after my interrogation, SS people appeared, and all those who were there, people who were taken from my flat, were freed, or rather transferred to the German SD. And there I was released.
Did you know how many people were being deported every day?
Es wurde ganz offen von Eichmann selbst mitgeteilt, dass jeden Tag 12.000 Menschen werden herausgeschickt.
This was, Eichmann said this quite openly, that every day 12,000 Jews were being deported.
Did you know
Where to?
where they were being sent to?
Where to?
Ich lasse die Mühle laufen.
Well, he once told us quite openly, cable your husband that I'm letting the mill run, I'm letting the shooting the works.
What did you understand from that? In what context was this said? What was the subject under
Was
discussion?
das genau damals gesprochen wurde, hundertprozentig kann ich mich nicht erinnern, aber es wurde gesprochen darüber, dass hat verschiedene Versprechungen gemacht, dass 15.000 werden in Eis gehalten und das wird gemacht und das wird gemacht und auf einmal, wo wir sind gekommen, davon ist überhaupt nichts eingehalten worden und was sollen wir im Ausland melden? Da hat er gesagt, Sie können ruhig telegrafieren, ich lasse die Mühle laufen, man soll nicht glauben, dass ich Angst habe.
Well, I cannot recall this with 100% clarity, but there were various promises of that nature, that he would leave 15,000 people on ice, as he put it, and other cases, but none of these promises were kept. And we asked him, what shall we cable abroad? So he answered me, you can tell your husband that I'm letting the mill start rolling.
Presiding Judge, I noticed that Mr. Brand is in the hall. I don't know. I would suggest that he leave the room.
President of Court, it is not yet certain whether you have concluded your testimony, Mr. Brand. Therefore, I am afraid you cannot stay in the hall. You cannot stay in the courtroom.
Check it.
גברת ברנד, כשהוא אמר, ich lasse die Mühle laufen, האם ידעתם לאיזה...
Mrs. Brand, when he said, I'm going to start the wheels rolling, did you know what mill, what wheels he meant?
Als schon dieses Angebot gemacht hat, dann haben wir schon gewusst, mit wem wir sprechen. Also wenn macht ein Angebot, dass will 1 Million Juden verkaufen für Ware, dann wir brauchten schon nicht viel nachzudenken, suchen, was das bedeutet, Mühle zu laufen. Das haben
Well, when he made us this proposal, we knew who the man was with whom we dealt. When he proposed 1 million people in exchange for goods, then we understood quite well, and we needed no additional explanations for the expression to set the wheels in motion. Of course, these were the gas chambers.
Did you manage to give this information abroad?
Yes.
You spoke about people who were going to be deported to Austria, or were going to be kept on ice, as it were. Could you give the court particulars of the conversation you had with Eichmann on this subject? Which people should be sent and who should not be sent, and where they should be sent?
Für alle, die noch im Leben waren.
We always spoke on behalf of all those who were still alive.
Hat man immer Kompromiss machen müssen, sogar bei den Verhandlungen.
But afterwards, one always had to compromise during the negotiations.
So sind wir dazu gekommen, dass hat versprochen, schickt endlich die 15.000 nach Austria ohne Selektion.
And so finally we agreed eventually that he would send these 15,000 people to Austria without any selection.
About which 15,000 was the discussion proceeding?
Als eisgelegte Juden.
Well, those were the people whom he had called from the very beginning frozen Jews, Jews on ice.
And which people did he want to choose for this purpose?
Wollte immer nur die Arbeitsfähige, die arbeiten können. Aber eben da waren die Verhandlungen und die Besprechungen, dass wir wollten ganze Familien retten. Und da hat er versprochen, dass er wird, ich kann mich schon nicht daran erinnern, von wo diese Leute noch zusammengehen. Dazu muss ich noch zufügen, dass während die Verhandlungen, es waren mehr und mehr Gebiete judenleer.
He always insisted on getting Jews who were fit for labor, who could do physical labor. But we always wanted to include entire families. And he promised something. Yes, and I want to mention here where we got these Jews from, because at that time many additional areas of Hungary would be completely evacuated and made empty of Jews.
Muss ich noch dazu sagen, zum Schluss ist das so gekommen, dass man hat die Züge verwechselt und sind einzelne Personen, ungefähr 15.000 oder 16.000, wirklich nach Straßhof gekommen.
Well, what happened in the end was that the trains were switched and single people, about 15 or 16,000 of them, did reach Straßhof.
In this context, with the Jews, with regard to the Jews who had to be sent to Straßhof, was anything said about good or bad biological material?
Interessiert zum Beispiel Juden aus Karpato-Russland, weil die sind positive Juden.
He, for instance, was not interested in Jews from the Carpatho-Russian area because he called these people positive Jews.
What does that mean, positive Jews?
Die Juden sind in ihrer Seele und ihre Körper Jehudim, und dazu muss ich noch sagen, dass in Ungarn damals war eine sehr assimilierte Land, so sehr viel Mischehen und
Well, those people were Jews in body and soul, and here I must explain that all over Hungary, in the other parts, the Jews were assimilated, there were mixed marriages, and so on.
wenn ich darf, ich den ethnisch wertvolle
In
Juden.
what type of Jews? In what was he really interested?
Well, his expression was he wanted ethnically valuable Jews.
Die wollte nicht behalten. Ethnisch wertvolle Juden.
Yes, he said ethnically valuable Jews, those he did not want to keep alive. Judge Halevi, those he did not want to save or those he did not want to deport?
Will
Mr.
die
Bach, would
Leute
you
nicht
explain,
behalten,
please, Mrs. Brandt?
die ethnisch wertvolle im Leben lassen.
Mrs. Brandt, these people he did not want to keep alive.
That is to say, those who had great ethnic value he did not want to leave alive.
No, he did not want.
Who in practice were the Jews who were sent to Straßhof?
Wenn ich mich gut erinnere, in Debrecen und diese Umgebung. Das ist ein rein ungarisches Gebiet.
If I remember well, those were Jews from the Debrecen area, a purely Hungarian area.
Do you remember a conversation with the accused with regard to the bringing of children into Budapest?
Yes, I do.
Please give the court particulars of this.
Es war, wieder muss ich noch einige Sätze dazu sagen, damit es klar sein soll, dass unsere ganze Arbeit war eine tägliche, mühsame Windmühlekampf, was wir einen Tag aufgebaut gehabt haben und hofften, dass wir haben etwas gemacht, Als nächsten Tag war das null und niedrig.
Yes, but here again I must say a few sentences about the nature of our work. Our entire work was in the nature of a fight against windmills. We would achieve something one day, and we hoped we had achieved something. It was null and void on the very next day.
So, dass wir haben unsere Forderungen immer beschränkt, damit wir zu irgendeiner Konklusion kommen. Und so ist das gekommen, dass ich habe mich schon beschränkt, nur die Kinder zu verlangen. Dass soll wenigstens die Kinder nicht nach Auschwitz schicken, dass die Kinder sollen bleiben in Ungarn und wir werden dafür sorgen, dass die Kinder werden von uns betreut.
Therefore, we restricted our demands so as to at least get some kind of a result. So we confined our request in the end to the children, to prevent at least the children from being taken to Auschwitz, and we would care for them in Hungary.
Selbstverständlich habe ich auch eine zurückwiesende Antwort bekommen und ich kann mich schon nicht so hundertprozentig auf den Wortwechsel, was war, nur ein Satz ist mir geblieben im Kopf, wo ich ihm gesagt habe, wahrscheinlich sie haben keine Kinder, deswegen haben sie auch kein Mitgefühl mit denen nicht.
Naturally, again, I encountered a refusal. I can no longer remember 100% the details of the conversation, but one sentence is engraved in my memory. I told him, apparently you have no children of your own if you have no feeling for them.